Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Welcome, 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 welcome. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started with today's panel. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission. Today, we're reviewing On-Ramp 2023 fellowship proposals for the 2023 cohort. I am Jordan Adams, Artist Services Program Manager for the Indiana Arts Commission. Eric Salazar, full-time musician, the clarinet guy, and 2019 participant of On-Ramp is joining us today as co-moderator. Today's date is Thursday, August 17th. The panelists are meeting on Zoom and the public is observing on YouTube. I will pass it on to Eric.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here as co-moderator. And we're looking forward to our panelists providing feedback on these applications. And at this time, we'd like the panelists to introduce themselves. So please give us your name, what you do, and where you're located. Let's start with John.
I'm John Myers. I'm with the Southeast Indiana Small Business Development Center, and I work out of Columbus, Indiana.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's have Jenny go next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jenny DeBenedito. I was a 2018 On-Ramp participant, and I am a multimedia artist working in design arts, but also in 3D, enameling, and ceramics. I'm currently located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but I lived in Jeffersonville, Indiana for many years before moving here recently.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Nicolas.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Gonzalez, and I currently serve as the Assistant Vice President for Strategic Innovation at the Manhattan School of Music in New York City. And I moved here about 3 years ago, but was formerly in Indiana doing my undergrad and master's.
Terrific. Thank you. And Ariel.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ariel Vinson. I'm a marketing manager at Macmillan, and I also write fiction, poetry, and personal essay. I also just recently moved. I'm in Dallas, but before February, I was in Indiana, and I'm born and raised Indiana.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Looking forward to hearing what you have to say today. And now I'm going to pass it back to Jordan.
All righty. Thank you, Eric, and thank you to our panelists for joining us today. This panel is designed to gather feedback that will help the applicant strengthen their fellowship project to advance their career. The discussion will also help IAC staff identify any important modifications applicants may be required to make to their fellowship project before moving forward. I will announce the application we will review. I'll ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide advice to strengthen the application, focusing on the evaluation criteria from their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since all of you have read it. Just provide your comments. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or differing comments. We are not looking for consensus. We want the applicant to receive excellent advice from the different perspectives that you all bring. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or differing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, that panelist will be placed in the virtual waiting room when the application is discussed, but we do not have any today. Finally, once the application has been discussed by the full panel, we ask the panel to update their comments in the online system. It is common for the recommendation to change because of this broader discussion. These changes will save automatically. Are there any questions before we get started? All righty, well, we will begin. We will start with the application On-Ramp 2023 deWeber. The first reader is John.
Okay. Right. First, I'd like to say this was a great program, and thank you to all the applicants who participated. You really get a good breadth of knowledge, and I got to speak at the 2018 cohort and another cohort I can't remember last year or the year before. Just a tremendously valuable information. So, and thank you for doing your art and contributing to Indiana. So, I'll start with my comments here. So in the goals, I said that supporting yourself through music was a good goal. For the feasibility, I said that the applicant should be able to complete the task listed in the timeline provided. And it sounds like the applicant already had a good support network in place. Under the community engagement, I commented that the applicant is engaging with the music community in a big way. Collaboration with other musicians and songwriters is great engagement, and engaging with residents, students, kids, communities would make for a stronger application. And under my recommendations, say as you make your promotional materials and demos, make them as high quality and consistent as possible and tell your story through your marketing materials.
Thank you, John. We will move to our second reader, Ariel.
Yes, I was really excited about this project. The only things I have to add are in the feasibility portion. The website timeline has a bit of kind of a long time there. So if it is self-designed, I'm wondering if that will hinder the timeline of the project. And then my only other question was just having a more detailed description of the subscriptions or memberships that the applicant plans to use. Having that in the budget would be helpful. And then for community engagement, I think like John said, we're already really engaging with the community, but I was curious about how can the applicant expand past the community collectives that they're already in and networking with. But other than that, I think this is a great project, and everything else was really thorough.
Thank you so much. Do we have any differing viewpoints?
I just want to add that one of the things I really appreciate about this application was that I think this applicant really looked inward a lot at like what they need to grow on. So I really appreciated that a lot of time was dedicated to that. I just had a couple of minor things like in the feasibility, specifically talking about the contingency. Just 1,000 seems really high, especially on that budget. So just clarifying kind of where the contingency might be going, or even trying to find a way to lower that. It just seems really high on that type of budget. And then also, I just really want the applicant, and this I will probably say this often across all applicants, but with community engagement, just really thinking about what is the specific need in the community and how you're addressing that. I think that you have a lot of great partnerships, and maybe some data about why this art needs to be in these spaces could have made this more clear on why community engagement is central to this application.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Definitely appreciate it. All righty, we will finalize comments. Awesome. Thank you, Eric. We will move to our next application, On-Ramp 2023 Veach. Our first reader is Jenny.
All right, I think this applicant did a really nice job of clearly identifying their project and career goals, and it really seems attainable based on their experience. And that purchasing their equipment is a good way to kind of further develop their kind of expertise in this area. Down in the feasibility section, just because I do have some experience in video and audio production, I noticed the $35 lavalier mic, which I know you can get one for that price. But if you're really interested in upping the quality of your work, and your podcasts and sound is so important, make sure that the equipment that you're getting is really going to be high quality and deliver the results that you need. So it might be, maybe you invest $100 or more in that mic since it's going to be so important for you. On the income side of your budget, I'd love to see a little bit more detailed estimation of the $800 in subscription and sponsorships that will come in. I think that's completely feasible, but it can be easier for you as an applicant to think about it as, okay, I need 80 subscriptions at $10 each, or maybe 80 seems like a high number. So maybe you need 40 subscriptions, but then 2 sponsorships, kind of breaking it down into goals. So as you go into marketing or reaching out to family and friends, it gives you kind of more concrete numbers to work towards. And I do think that that could be one of your biggest challenges towards growing your podcast into a sustainable source of income, is figuring out the right method to get those sponsorships and subscriptions. So really thinking about that. And also thinking about the tactics to help get your word out. Could you enlist 10 friends or family members to help get that going and see if they can get somebody else enlisted? So there's definitely ways to do it without feeling too salesy about it. In the community engagement section, your topic of death is universal, and I think it's really nice that you're understanding that not everybody is comfortable or ready to discuss that, and creating a forum of conversation where people who are ready to talk about it at the conferences that you might be going to speak at and record at is a great way to kind of grow that network. But then I also really loved that you mentioned for folks who might not be comfortable speaking about it live or being on the podcast with you, opening up those areas for people to submit questions in. So that wasn't really talked about a lot on how those would come in, but maybe you have a newsletter that you send things out. So thinking, just tactically about how you'll do that. But between all the participants in this and the different organizations and events where they would be going live and traveling to film, I feel like they really did a good job of reaching out beyond their current network to see what community can be engaged beyond the local spot for us. And that's all of my original feedback.
Thank you, Jenny. Our next reader is Nick.
Yes, I just wanted to also echo that I thought this is a really strong application and really like to see how this is really going to grow your business. Specifically in the goals, I thought they were really strong, but what could have made it even stronger is if you had defined what growth meant for you. There's no real baseline of like, I have 1,000 followers and I need 2,000 followers. You say you're successful, but I want to just have a little more definition in terms of like who you're bringing to your podcast, where you're going, and how research is helping your storytelling. In the feasibility, I had a question that I wasn't sure because in the goals, they listed that they want to become an editor or learn that, but there is still a line item for consulting. So I just wasn't sure if that is, they still plan to hire an editor or if they wanted to be the audio editor, just clarifying what that was. And then also just being absolutely clear on your dates, saying something like, this might extend past the project timeline when you're told to make sure it falls within a specific timeline. Just remember, it's just a best guesstimate, and just making sure if I'm a grant person trying to grant you money, making sure you stay within those that timeline. And then also with community engagement, I think at the heart of what this project is really gets to community engagement, but where I think it got lost in the written part is making sure it's not being seen as an artist promotion. I really wanted to see more written materials of how this is relevant and how talking about death helps people more. I didn't really get that. I kind of just saw it as you're going to all these conferences to promote your art, which is not community engagement. But again, I do think that you have all the stuff there. It's just kind of fine tuning the language to making sure that it's really helping the community.
Thank you, Nick. Do we have any additional information or comments?
Yeah, just a little bit of what Nick said, but adding on to that, the application mentioned Substack, and so I'm wondering how those Substack followers can be further engaged, and how they can help with, connecting you with other community organizations, because I think this application really focuses on a national scope. There's South by Southwest there, and so I wonder, with the support groups you mentioned, how can you use those to connect with others locally? So I guess what I'm saying is there's a huge national scope, but local scope isn't as defined.
Thank you, Ariel. And I kind of mentioned this at yesterday's panel. We do want to focus, we don't frown upon expanding your community outreach, but we do want the foundation and the primary scope to be within Indiana, because this is an Indiana funded grant. So we'll talk more later at the conclusion, but that's just something to know. Thank you. We will finalize comments. Awesome. Thank you, Eric. We will move to our next application, On-Ramp 2023 Perez. Our first reader is Nick.
So I really enjoyed reading about this application. The applicant really shows a lot of creativity, which as a more of an administrator, I really appreciate seeing that creativity within this application. What could have just made the goals a little stronger is adding more description, specifically in the project summary. That's kind of your first sentence to really show me as the reader what this project is. So just really making sure it is the heart and a full description of what it is I'm about to read. And then also just kind of clarifying what you do as an artist. I know it says multidisciplinary, but just making sure it's like super clear how that's connecting to the project that the gallery show that this person was mentioning for this project. In the feasibility, I thought it was all very clear and concise. The only thing I would recommend is that the applicant look at paying themselves. You're doing a lot of great work and deserve a payment, even if that goes above the $2,000, making sure that you can supplement that on the income side as well to make sure it balances out. And then on the community engagement, again, I think that your work naturally engages the community, but I want to see a little more rationale. What is the need? Why are you placing it in these areas? And what role does that have in making sure you're reaching a broader audience? I think that could have been more teased out. But overall, I thought this was a really fantastic application, and just more data points would have just made it stronger.
Thank you, Nick. Go ahead, Jenny.
Yeah, I'll really echo this. I thought this was a really thoughtful application. In the feasibility, the biggest, as I first started reading, my biggest worry was, oh, do you have a gallery space lined up and you have that connection already? And you did a nice job of outlining a pretty clear timeline, including the creation of the artwork and promoting the exhibition. So the key points that I, often look at that feasibility section, you covered that really nicely. And, the budget does seem balanced. I agree, with all this time you're putting in, look for a way to pay yourself, even if that's through sales of artwork and things like that, to balance it out on the income side. And on the community engagement, I did think there was a nice, it could be more detailed, but, having that survey that's going to go out to people first, and then having that as a way to inform your artwork that will then go back to the community seems like a nice, attempt at doing that two-way communication of, you're not just creating the artwork and putting it out there, but you're taking that community feedback to help develop and create the artwork and the experience. And then it was also really nice, the idea of having fellow creatives come in. So you have that network and you're getting their interpretation of the exhibition that you've put together, and then providing a even bigger art experience for the viewers that will come there, because they're now seeing, musicians or poets and writers respond to your artwork. So that was a nice way to expand the network of creatives involved in this project.
Thank you for that. Do we have any additional comments?
I do, just a quick one. In the feasibility, it's marked as August 2024, visit around town, talking about the show and inviting people and organizations. I feel like that might be a little late to start in-person marketing, but that's my only note there.
Thank you for that. All righty. We will finalize comments. Thank you, Eric. Our next application is on-ramp 2023 Powell-Smith. Our first reader is Ariel.
Okay, I was really excited about this project and blown away by the art itself. I got some great information, I feel like, in the goals. My only note for the goals is there's a mention of Georgette and a connection to Georgette, and I kind of had to research myself. So putting those details in the application to help readers know who that is and what your connection is and why it's important in the art space would be great. I was also curious about who your work is aimed toward in your experience. There are a few places where you say our people and things like that, but I would love to know who you're making your art for, who you're trying to impact. For feasibility, while I think the timeline is very detailed, I think it could use some more. It's a little rough on the dates and deadlines for obtaining some materials. And there's a personal arts community mentioned, and I'm interested in the ways they'll be helpful. But there is no line item in the budget for marketing the show itself. So I'm wondering if there's some ways to work that in, if there are places to cut otherwise, even if it's just a little bit. And then for community engagement, you're working in the legacy of a well-known Black artist. So I think it's important to truly narrow down the community organizations and areas you'll be reaching out to. Right now, the portion's a bit vague. And I just really want you to zero in on who can be impacted from this, where is the need, and how you can partner in the community. One of the first things I thought about when I read this application was 1,000 Words Art Gallery. I think that's what it's called. It's in East Indianapolis, and I think that might be a great space to at least connect with and see what kind of partnerships or even what kind of promotion they can do for your solo exhibition and artist talk. But again, I thought this was great. Just a little bit more details in each category would help us really understand the full scope of the project.
Thank you for that and for those resources, Ariel. Our next reader is John.
Yeah, I like this application too. And one of the things that I really liked was that the applicant was making themselves accessible to their audience. I think that's fantastic. One other comment that I had was in doing the math and the budget, it seemed like things didn't add up, which isn't like a deal breaker, but it might be good to go back and just make sure that all those figures are correct.
Was that everything, John? Was that everything, John? I think so. Okay. So we're going to move. Well, do we have any additional comments? Okay. We'll finalize comments. Thank you, Eric. We'll move to our next application, on-ramp 2023 Troyer. Our first reader is John.
Internet trouble, I apologize.
Oh, you're fine.
Okay. Okay, so my comments are under the goals. The goals were specific, measurable, and achievable. And it's clear how temporary public art displays can lead to permanent public art displays. In the feasibility, I felt like the project can be completed in the timeline provided, and the applicant appears to have the skills necessary to complete the project. In community engagement, public art is all about community engagement. Applicant is also added engaging with the community through QR codes and discussions, which is great. Under other recommendations, I said I'd like to see that there are other financial, I like to see that there's other financial contributions. So I appreciate that actually in all the applicants that there's some other funds coming in. I like that as well. And I actually very much enjoy public art and like this project.
Thank you. Our second reader is Ariel.
My only additional note, well, don't give me the lion, let me see. For feasibility, my note is marketing, once again, coming from the marketing manager. So I'm wondering how other installations have been marketed here. If there is any, and I know, of course, people are walking up and down a trail, so, you know, maybe there isn't as much needed, but I do want the applicant to give that some thought. And then for community engagement, I think the QR code is a great idea, but how can you turn those viewers into long-term consumers of your art? So in other words, how can you interact with the residents in non-passive ways? I feel like a QR code is kind of a touch and go. So what are other ways you can keep these folks engaged with your art, and how can you, I guess, give back to them in even more ways than just the installation? Otherwise, very cool and great. I was excited about it.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Yeah, just a few things to add. I saw that, you know, in the very beginning, the project dates for this project, the date timeline really aligns just with the actual installation itself, rather than all the work, you know, that's going into the weather testing and creating the artwork, which from my understanding for IAC grants, that would be included as well. So you would really probably start your project at the beginning of the grant period, and then it would, you know, go through the installation, and then maybe also a little bit beyond it to have some of your follow-up and feedback and, you know, getting information from the community of people that viewed it. And in feasibility, I was just going to point out that you had a line kind of indicating personal contribution for additional things for $2,000 under the expense list, but really that was something under income. So you kind of had it listed two places. So just make sure that you don't list anything that's, you know, an income under the expense side, and have that balanced out well.
Thank you, Jenny. Any other comments? Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I just had a couple more, primarily in the goals and community engagement. So with the goals, I really think that the short-term goals are really clear and concise, but I was missing kind of the long-term impact and really how this is really developing yourself. I just think that there could have been a little more clarity around that, and how this project really does set you up to be either a full-time artist or something more than just increasing its accessibility. And then the community engagement, I think for me, whenever I'm reading community engagement is more about the storytelling. So when you kind of list all of how you're doing community engagement, I kind of lose the humanity or the deepness of your impact. So I encourage the applicant, when they talk about community engagement, really to think about the story that they're trying to tell and how it's really connecting with communities, because otherwise, to me, it'll just kind of seem like you're just trying to gain reputation, which is not community engagement, which I think we all know. But I think that storytelling will kind of help with making it be community engagement.
For sure. Thank you, Nick. I did want to go back to Jenny's comment and confirm that, yes, I said this yesterday too. If the project is an exhibition, an event, something of that nature. The dates aren't just that. The dates are all the work that surrounds that. So yes, we want to make sure that those dates are accounted for, and that timeline is including that. Okay. We will finalize comments. Thank you, Eric. We will move on to our next application, which is on-ramp 2023 Bibbs. Our first reader is Jenny.
All right. On this project, I'm not certain if this was an issue on my end or not, but the samples of work zip folder appeared to be empty for me. So if anyone else had that issue, for the applicant, make sure that, when you're uploading those samples, it's in a way that the reviewers will be able to access them. Also, there were definitely many typos throughout the application. I think I was able to follow along with it, but you want to put your best application forward to reviewers so that they have everything that they need without having questions. So it's good if you have time to have a friend or a colleague or even someone at the IAC review it in that time period that's provided for you. The applicant did share a big picture goal that this project ties into, by purchasing a truck that's going to help generate the revenue for owning their own mobile photography business. But it's kind of unclear to me which stages of this project are part of the project, because they talk about a lot of things and not all of those things are included in the budget. And down in the feasibility section, there's not really a clear timeline identified either. So I know we're looking to purchase the vehicle, but we talk about lighting and generator in the application, but it's not always part of the budget. So really clearly defining those things, because I think also a worry on something like this is we want to see at the completion of the project that you have something that's going to set you up for success for meeting those goals. And if this has only gotten you halfway through the project, at the end of it, you're not really ready to put it into use and to support your business and your creative career goals. So really think about that. And perhaps a way to do that, if you need more money on the expenses side to cover those things, to make sure that at the end of the grant period you are ready to roll, how can you bring in more income from it? And kind of tying into the community engagement section, maybe there's ways with those connections with the Chamber of Commerce, which was great to add, but didn't have a lot of detail around it. Maybe you can build that out. Maybe there's partnerships. Maybe there's some kind of additional thing where you can provide headshots at a meeting at a discounted rate, and something to bring in a little bit of income, but also be providing a service to the community, something like that, to show that you're kind of giving back to the community, but also supporting your goals and making sure that at the end of the project, you have something that's really setting you up for success, and not just halfway there that you have to wait until a next grant opportunity to be able to reach your goals.
Thank you, Jenny. Definitely appreciate that. Our next reader is Nick.
Yeah, I had a lot of the same comments as Jenny, especially with the zip folder. It also contained nothing for me. I think I would just want to expand upon just making sure you're putting your best foot forward. I think what is really great about this fellowship application is that, or like the application in general, is that there's a lot of space to really tell us who you are, what this project is, what you really want to do. And if everything's just kind of answered in one or two sentences, it's hard for us to really understand you as an artist and where you want to go. So really utilize all the space that this application is giving you. And if this is a real grant application, adding all those details will definitely make it stand out over other applications. I think the only other major thing that I would add is in the feasibility, the one thing that makes me worried as I look at this is the large amount from personal contribution. Maybe that's realistic, but for me, it just gave me a little pause as how you're fully funding this. And then as well with community engagement, community engagement is not just about your networking, it's really about how this is benefiting the community. So kind of really thinking about that a little more, or finding the mutual benefit in this as you write about this, I think would answer the question more.
Thank you, Nick. Any additional comments?
Yes, just to reiterate what Nick and Jenny said, that more is precise community engagement, because I think this is a really cool project and a really innovative idea, and it seems like there's a ton of community engagement that could happen. Headshots, of course, festivals. There's a lot of things that could happen. I'd also like to see like the who and the why. So who's the target customer? Like who are you really trying to approach? Who's going to be interested in this business, and why are they going to be interested in that?
Thank you. All this feedback was extremely helpful. Thank you for that. We'll finalize comments. Awesome. We will move to our next application on ramp 2023 Palyshniuk. My apologies if I pronounced that wrong. Our first reader is Nick.
So this was a fun application to read, especially because I like photography. So reading more about that was a lot of fun. I think what I really got from this application is a lot about this applicant, like how they really arrived to their art, which can be really good to read. I would just say, like, as a grant application, just making sure you're getting to the point quicker, because I think you get there towards the end of your paragraphs, but making sure it's also upfront. And then also really thinking about your long-term goals. I think what you're doing in the short term is really cool and interesting, but I kind of lost really precisely what your end game really is, and how you want to develop over time. So I think just a little more reflection on your long-term strategy could really help out with this application. One of the great things about the feasibility is that this is one of the few, if not the only application that really listed who the partners are. And as someone who's reading this, it makes me feel much more confident that this project is going to happen when I see that you've thought deeply about who your partners are. In terms of the description, I kind of wish I would like to see the dates with the activities rather than kind of activities here, dates here, just so that I can kind of picture it better as I'm reading through the application. And then with community engagement, I just think a little more attention to that. I'm kind of missing the need. I think you're kind of getting it when you're talking about humanitarian aid to Ukraine, but how it's really connected to everything and not just expanding your network. Just a little more description. I think you're on the right track there. It's just maybe a little more storytelling about how this is being impactful would have made me feel stronger about the community engagement.
Thank you, Nick. Go ahead, Jenny.
All right. I thought this was a really thorough application. In the goals, I'll also echo a little bit that I hate to say this on one part, but the career goals, when tied to this, as we're reviewing the grants, we want to see that your project goals are getting you closer to your career goals. And the career goal here, I don't want to say that anyone career goal is bad. This is a great goal of wanting to expand this idea of art hiking, but also think about it as making sure that whatever that goal is that you're going towards is also going to be sustainable for you. Right now, it was kind of a goal of expanding the knowledge of this art form and art hiking, but how does that become truly something as a career goal and not just a expanding the knowledge of this art form? kind of goal, so that it becomes sustainable for you as you move forward. So something to think about, not anything that negatively affected the way that I read your application. And then down in community engagement, I liked this idea, especially, thinking about maybe this is getting families out to explore new things and expand the way that they think about art in the world. I thought that was a really nice piece of, as people are going to look for the areas and rock formations and things that you identified and photographed, it also inspires them to view the world around them in a different way. So I think this could lead to, new people and new communities, around you, expanding their view of art and becoming artists themselves when they hadn't thought about it that way before. So I liked that aspect of this, is kind of opening someone's view to a whole new world around them that they hadn't seen before. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Jen. Any additional comments? Alrighty, seeing none, we will finalize our comments. Thank you, Eric. We're about halfway through. I just want to check on our panelists to make sure everyone's good. If we need to take a break or anything. Okay. We'll power through. Our next application is On-Ramp 2023 Wood. Our first reader is Ariel.
Okay, once again, I was excited by this project. I thought it was really cool, and I loved seeing the heirlooms and being able to really visualize what that looks like. For the goals portion, where is it? For the goals portion, I feel like it's thoroughly described. You help me understand what, metalsmithing achieves. And my only feedback for the goals is that I don't know what the markers of success are here for this project, and just for the long-term goals in general. So, of course, with what you've attached, I see what you have done, but I want to know how this project is going to get you closer to that long-term goal. For feasibility, I think the expenses are very well broken down and described. I am concerned about the graphic designer and photographer cost. They feel a little low for me, but if you have those connections already, that would be great to outline in this application. And then for printing, that also seemed a bit high for me. So again, I wonder what resources you're using and if that can be outlined here. And if you need to cut costs, there's always Canva and VistaPrint for printing. I don't know, I know it depends, the quality is very important here. So that's all your choice, but it would be great to have an understanding of where that spending is happening, so you can really see where you can spend elsewhere. For community engagement, excuse me, I think this is one of my favorite parts of the project. I think you're really reaching out to the communities that need it most, and honestly reaching out to communities that are often overlooked because of age or because of other things. And so I think it's baked into the project. I think your targeting is lovely, and I don't have any, I think, negative comments or critical comments on the community engagement. So that's my overall.
Very thorough. Thank you so much. Our next reader is John.
The only thing I would add is that I really appreciate that you did have a target audience in there, very specific, and also you identify community partners. So well done.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
I have a little piece to add. I really appreciate, this whole project, but I worry that maybe too much emphasis for the project, but also for your kind of career goals is being tied to this postcard. and like a printed piece. So it is certainly a tool for you, but make sure that you're viewing it as that. This is just one tool in your network and of your ability to meet with people. And also consider, is the postcard always going to be the right piece for your audience? I part of my job is as a graphic designer and thinking about, if you're meeting with the seniors, then maybe a postcard or a trifold brochure might be the right piece. Another audience is if you've already lost your loved one who's older, but so your customer might now be a younger generation, then maybe it's not a printed piece at all. Maybe it's building out more of a virtual piece. So making sure that for each segment, target audience, that the piece that you're creating is really the most meaningful. Is it a postcard? Is it a trifold brochure? Is it, a virtual piece? So really making sure that the piece that you're creating and putting so much emphasis on is the right thing for your target audience.
Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I
Nick.
just echo that. I think this is a very beautiful project, and I really wish the applicant all the success. And just to echo what Jenny said, which is, I just think the applicant can really think bigger and deeper about their long-term goals. Seems very short-term right now. And in the feasibility, I think it makes sense because of the way that it was described in the application, that 3/4 of your budget is marketing, but I feel like there could be a lot more resources allocated towards building connections, which is the other part of this brand identity and expansion that this applicant is looking to do more of. So I think they could think a little more about how that might actually look in the budget to make sure that's well described. And then just want to echo how great I think the community engagement is. And again, wish all the applicant all the luck.
Thank you. Eric, are you good? Okay. I was like, I saw your thumb, but okay, awesome. We will move to our next application. On-ramp 2023, Campbell-Maher. Our first reader is John.
Right. So I have under goals that the short-term and long-term goals are clearly stated. An applicant references using funds to assist with a 5-year strategic plan, which I like. I like the big vision. I like the long-term. I like using this program to as a springboard to a long-term thing. Under feasibility, I have that applicant's resume displays the ability to successfully fulfill the project. Community engagement, applicant has listed community partners to assist with project. Applicant indicates the project's purpose and purpose to have participants from the community engage with creating music at the events. And then for my feedback, I think this is a well done application. Applicant provides what funds will go towards and how this will assist with achieving the short and long-term goals. And applicant is also providing some funds out of pocket, which I also do like to see.
Thank you. John, I'm going to ask you to elaborate on why you like to see that.
I just from the small business perspective, I like to see people have skin in the game.
Mm-hmm.
Like you have a little bit of yourself out there, and you're not depending on one source of income. And not necessarily do I think that it has to be their personal funds, but just other sources, other support out there, I think says a lot. So if you come to the Indiana Arts Commission asking for a grant, but you have some other support, I mean, to me, I'm more comfortable with providing that because you have that support externally.
For sure. Thank you. Okay. Any additional? No, Ariel, sorry. I got lost in my elaboration. Go ahead.
I also really enjoy this project. I think the goals were spot on here. And again, I think I would love to know measures of success, but the short-term and long-term goals are really clearly defined. For feasibility, again, clearly defined, but for the print materials, I kind of want to echo what Jenny said for the last applicant in that print materials might not always be the avenue for marketing your work, and possibly in this case, especially because it's about group classes or group sessions, online flyers or ads or promotion might be more impactful here. Let's see. And then for community engagement, I'm curious about how you believe each organization that you listed will help you expand your audience and help with your long-term goals, but mostly how they can be ongoing. So I love that you listed different organizations here, but do you imagine working with them for each workshop? Or do you imagine finally partnering with one organization? What audiences do they provide? And then my overall question for this application is, how are your sound sessions different from the ones that are already offered in Indianapolis? And how can you emphasize that in the application? Because you tell us a lot about your skills and your training, and that's amazing. But for the sessions alone, when you're trying to get an audience, trying to get more customers, trying to get more folks interested in this, how can you emphasize what you bring to the table?
Thank you, Ariel. Any additional comments? Okay,
I
go
would
ahead.
just add a couple things. One is I was unfamiliar with, I'm probably going to say it wrong, but Shawna's singing, whatever it's called. So I had to do a little research on my end to really know what it is. And I just think the applicant could have more clearly connected to what it is in the application. So I, as the reviewer, don't have to constantly go digging for that information. And I think what's really cool about this project is that they talk a lot about how this is really improving wellness for the community. So I kind of just wanted to see that fleshed out a little more. I kept seeing about how this applicant is really good and skilled to do this type of training, but not really seeing the full effect of wellness. I got some stats from the Americans for the Arts, which is fantastic. I love the stats there. But just kind of seeing it a little more fleshed out throughout the rest of the project would have been nice. And then my only other question for the applicant is, are there any barriers to attending this or barriers to understanding this? Because I'm just curious if, since this is what I perceive as a very niche area, is there any educating or explaining of what you're doing and how that might affect your attendance? So just maybe thinking about that a little. At least for me, I thought could have been addressed. But overall, a great application.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Eric, whenever you're done with your notes. Thank you, Eric. We'll move to our next application, on-ramp 2023 DOS. Our first reader is Jenny.
All right, this was a really beautifully articulated application, so thank you for the time and effort you put into this. For the goals section and the project goal specifically, I think you may want to make some minor adjustments there to make sure that your project goal is tangible and measurable, or a SMART goal, so specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. So the applicant here says, I'll know my project has been achieved when I am no longer being presented as an amateur. I worry that that's a bit too much, about perception. So maybe you can adjust it to be more in tune with some of the things that you identified in your task. So an example could be that your project is complete when you have purchased your identified equipment and art products, and your new website is launched with at least X number of artworks for purchase. Or you also mentioned further down the application of kind of launching your website in releases of or collections of artwork. So when you're accomplished when you've released your first collection or your second collection. So something that is more specific, measurable, and time bound, rather than just something that's a matter of perception or feeling, because that can be really hard to know when you've reached it. And I don't know about other folks on the call, but no matter where you are in your career, you often always feel like you're not quite there yet. There's always more growth. So being viewed just as amateur or professional is a really blurry line. And you want to have something specific and measurable so you can check it off and say, yes, I did that, and feel really good about accomplishing that goal. I'll also note that as reviewers of grant applications, and this kind of applies to everybody, we are asked to review things in their segmented chunks. So like we review the goals section, and then we review the feasibility section. So in here, some of the project goals are what I would say are project goals were identified in a different section, but they weren't as clearly identified in the goals section. So sometimes it feels redundant as you're, answering these questions and you're saying the same thing over and over again. But as reviewers, it makes it a lot easier for us to have the whole picture for each question, since we are kind of evaluating things in chunks. So if you're answering it in different sections, make sure you answer it in every section. For the feasibility section, the project details were well thought out and included dates and strategies and tactics, which was really helpful as a reviewer. It meant we didn't have to make assumptions about what your thoughts were because you included a lot of detail there. And the budget seemed balanced and reasonable. And I really did like the idea of launching a new website can be time intensive. So tackling it in like a phased product launch seemed like a manageable way to get that out. And you're also not saying you have to have every single product you have listed to be successful for your grant. You just need a first collection or a second collection launched. So that's a good way to go about it. For community engagement, it really seems like this applicant is trying to be really in tune with the creative community and the creative supporters in their area by participating in a lot of events. But I also I read that the applicant and their involvement in so many events has also kind of led to them becoming a mentor for aspiring creatives. So that's a nice cycle of things, and speaking to that two-way community engagement that is how the IAC defines it is, you are not just at art fairs selling your work, you are getting feedback from your customers on what they want to create, but you're also being a mentor for new creatives that can improve that cycle. Really, really nice work on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. I really appreciate you pointing out that criteria section for sure. Our next reader on this applicant is Nick.
Thank you. One of the things that I think that made me feel really confident for this applicant is how they have a strong sense of vision. I kind of agree with Jenny that maybe could have been fleshed out, could have been a little more specific, but I will just say that having the big picture vision gave me a lot of confidence and made me feel like this application was strong. So as you look to adjust, as this applicant looks to adjust things, don't lose sight of the big picture vision, because I got a lot of confidence from that. With the goals and the feasibility, this might just be me as an applicant, but anytime I see a budget narrative, it's always just kind of helpful to organize by dates and have like the dates being very clear at the top, just so, because it's a lot of text, and just when it comes to feasibility, we're just trying to make sure that it is within the timeline, that's within budget. So I would just encourage the applicant to maybe think about that as you relook at this application. I love how the community is so core to what this applicant, their art form. And I think that these ideas of pop-up shows and being at events is really great for showing up, but it would have been great to hear why you're selecting those locations. Is it because there's no access to this art form? And really telling why this is for that community just would have made this application a little stronger.
Thank you, Nick. Any additional comments?
Yeah, just in the feasibility section, there's a portion of the application where you mention increasing production. So I'm wondering if the $504 that is listed for investing in art products, I'm wondering if that needs to go up a bit, or if you've already factored that in. And then for community engagement, I just had a few questions about how you can maybe make this more detailed, because you do say, you have community support, but I wonder how can we quantify the impact, and how can we think about, how can we continue to partner with organizations to make this impact even larger?
Thank you, Ariel. Any other comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll finalize comments. Awesome. Moving to our next application, on-ramp 2023 Buck. Our first reader is Nick.
Thank you. Just 1 second, I'm just pulling up the application. So I thought this was a really good application. I really see how this project really advances their career, and how articulate they are in their goals. One thing that I think just could have made the goals even stronger is just a little more benchmarks and data points. Like, what does a successful second fashion show look like? And what does it mean to really build a stronger network of creatives? I think I'm making a lot of assumptions when I'm reading it, but just making sure it's absolutely clear in your writing, because I think the goals are really good, but just that would have made it a little stronger. In terms of the feasibility, I think there are a couple of inconsistencies, but overall, I think it was good. Specifically, the venue donation should be an in-kind. So removing that from the expenses and revenue to the in-kind portion. There's something else here. What is the $650 for seating? I was just a little, I just didn't know what that was and why that is so high. One thing I would have liked to see is the artists pay themselves, because they're doing a lot of great work. So adding that into the budget. And then also just kind of like what I said with probably previous applicants, is just looking for a different way to describe your budget, just to make it super clear in maybe with dates on the header and more of a list form than that, just to make it a little easier to see. And then with community engagement, I thought they were really strong in community engagement. And I'm really inspired that by doing this project, they're really growing the artist community. So I think just, talking a little bit more about that in the community engagement, and how this is helping the arts ecosystem and the community by doing more of this, or how it's helping collaboration, which is something I think can come from this. But that's an assumption I'm making because it wasn't written there. So again, I think all the materials are there. It's just kind of fleshing it out a little more. And overall, I thought this was a really great application, and wish the applicant all the best of luck on this.
Thank you, Nick. Was having a hard time getting to my mute button. Go ahead, Jenny.
All right. So I echo a lot of the same things, but some additional feedback here. I did notice several typos throughout the application. So again, if you have time, review that, and or areas that weren't quite clear to me as a reviewer, and some things that I had to make assumptions about, or kind of guess at what you were meaning. So just make sure that everything is as clear as possible, so that we are reading exactly what your intentions are, rather than kind of having to make some guesses as we go through. In the goals section, I do think this is another one where if you just look at the project start date and project end date that were identified, both of them are just December 9th, which is the date of the event. But like we talked about for an application earlier, your project would start before that. You're doing all the work leading up to it, and then probably doing some follow-up work after it to get feedback from folks. So make sure that your project dates for this grant project incorporate all the work that you're doing. And then I also see that what's currently listed like in the goal section seems to be a little bit more like the impact or the results that might come from completing the show rather than something that's tangible and measurable as the IAC outlines their goals. So if the project goal is truly building a bigger network or in creating a safe space, et cetera, which is amazing pieces, how can those be measured and how do you know when you've achieved those? So is it when you've expanded your network by a certain number of people, or do you collect feedback and surveys to know people's experiences to identify that they've had a safe space? So just making sure that the things that you're identifying are also kind of tied into measurable goals or SMART goals so that you can really know when you've reached that level of success and accomplished your project and your goals there. Excuse me just a second while I'm reading. It also feels like while you might be saying the same thing over and over again, I spoke about this earlier too, make sure that you're speaking to each question and all of your project in each response, because I did have to do a lot of skipping back and forth in the application to get around. Down in the feasibility section, I'll also kind of say there was a question about the venue and the pricing and is it an expense or an in-kind. I also noticed that at one point venue was listed at 700 and another point venue was 650, and that kind of just brought in a little bit of question. So you want to make sure you don't want to put doubt in the reviewer's mind. So making sure that everything is really accurate so we don't have to question and worry if there were perhaps mistakes in other areas. And then down in the community engagement section, really making sure that your goals that you have tie into the community engagement. Some of the things that you identified is, that by starting this project, we're going to be reviving the fashion industry in Indiana, which is an amazing statement and, the network of things. But it seems a little bit lofty or far connected just based on this project. So maybe tying in the steps of community engagement and networking that get you to that, because it seems like a big leap from having this one event in the little community that you'll have here and then reinvigorating a huge industry throughout the state. So what are some of those steps that'll get you there of community engagement, expanding the network of people in the fashion industry, expanding the network of consumers, and making the connections between those two. So just making sure when you highlight those big goals, which are amazing and worthwhile, that you're also kind of hinting at how you will get to them.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
I would just reiterate the timeline because it looked like they had an end of the year, and the applicant's already done one show, so they probably know better than me. But you have more time than that, so you might want to use it.
If
For
I
sure.
could
Go ahead, Ariel.
as well. For the feasibility, I was curious about the marketing timeline as well as the timeline for sourcing a videographer, because that's not listed out here. And then for community engagement, I loved the fact that you're sourcing the models from the community, but I wonder if representation counts as community engagement, and then how we can move past just representation in the show to, growing your audience, engaging with the community in an impactful way as you go through this project and past the project.
Definitely. Thank you. We will finalize comments. Awesome. We will move to our next application, On-Ramp 2023 Bailey. Our first reader is John.
Okay. Under goals, I like the goal of an artist being able to support themselves. I think that's a tremendous goal. So I appreciate that. Under feasibility, it seemed to me that they had the experience and skills necessary to complete the project, although maybe they would want to give themselves a little bit more time to complete that. Under community engagement, I like that they're getting people involved in the stories and characters via the events and local businesses. It's good community engagement, and highlighting Southwest Indiana is nice. Also, maybe they could engage some local tourism agencies as well down in the Evansville area there. Also, they had mentioned in the application that they were wanting to reach a global audience. And I will say that my organization, the Small Business Development Center, we have some funds to help do global trade shows and some SEO for website development to, reach out to a global audience. So those resources are there for free if they would like to use those too.
Awesome. Thank you for those resources, John. Our next reader is Ariel.
I really had fun with this application because it was writing. I think this was well done and really thorough. For the goals section, I just had some questions to further expand the answers here, especially because you mentioned you have a mentor and you're listing out some of the new things that you'd like to try. I would love to know how have ads, for example, helped your mentor gain new readership? Because you mentioned that those will help you gain new readership. So if you have those numbers, what are the numbers there? Were they substantial? And how will new media help increase your readership, especially because you've had media coverage before? So how is this new media helping? And of course, I know these answers, but having this written out in the application is helpful for reviewers who aren't writers or who maybe don't dabble in your art themselves. And then for the feasibility, I love the involvement that other brands have in this project. This application is really exciting and drums up some enthusiasm. You have everything written out, every single thing. So I think that's great. And there is a list, not a list, I'm sorry. In the budget, you've listed out USPS cost, and I'm trying to scroll down to it. And those look a little expensive for me just because you can send books via media mail, and that is usually cheaper. Now, granted, I think you might have to go to the post office, but it is much cheaper than sending as non-media mail when you're sending books. And then let's see. You can substantially, okay, that's what I said. You can substantially cut your media or postage cost and possibly put more money toward ads, since you said your mentor uses these and they've been helpful. If I can suggest, I've seen book ads do well on Pinterest and Meta, which is like Facebook and Instagram. So if you have a business account on Facebook, you should be able to set those up. But with Instagram, you can boost your post. These may be things you already know, but I would love for you to really specify or really think about where else you can do ads outside of places that sell books. So you mentioned Amazon, Google AdWords, Goodreads, but social media is selling just as many books, if not more, or at least getting people to click and engage with your work. For community engagement, I loved that you mentioned some collaboration and relationships here, but I'm wondering how you can have more direct community engagement. How can you directly interact and engage with the Evansville food truck? How can you directly engage with your audience? And you bring up that there's a diverse cast in the book, but again, how can we directly engage with diverse audiences? So I'd love some more details there about how you're finding those diverse audiences, or where you're looking, or maybe what partnerships you have in mind to kind of fully encompass the scope of the book that you're working on.
Thank you for that. Any additional comments?
Yeah, I wanted to point out, and certainly the IAC staff would know this better than me, but as reviewing this and the way that I understand it, much of this project, you really detailed out in the feasibility section dates and phases, but I think most of what you outlined would not really be applicable for this grant application because it's taking place before the grant period begins. So, you know, be sure as you do this, and I don't know how strict it is on this on-ramp grant, but on many other grants, that is going to be very strict. If your project is outside of the project dates, you have disqualified yourself before you can even be reviewed. So on this project, if it's not possible to shift back your project timeline because you already have this published date, then maybe there's a way to reframe the way you're looking at your project and what is included in your project tasks. Maybe it's more about marketing the book afterwards or doing, you know, book tours or things like that. So if we can't capture the work leading up to the book launch because that's already been set and established, how can we reframe the project so that it does meet the project timelines so that, you know, you're not disqualified kind of because of a technicality. Again, I don't know how that affects this on-ramp grant, but for other grants, that will be a major player and would knock you out of the running.
Thank you for that, Jenny. You know, you're right on par. We don't necessarily disqualify or do that. We work to rearrange, but that is a great point toward other grants. But yes, the work for this needs to be within the fellowship period, September 2023 to September 2024. So thank you for emphasizing that. Any additional comments?
I just have one, or I had 2 points. One, with the budget, if the expenses don't equal the income, and for the purposes of fellowship, they need to make sure that they're equal to one another. So just making sure the applicant looks at that. The one question I had is it made me question if this is realistic, because of can the fashion show really be done on $100? I see that you're paying 5 models $20 an hour, but I just feel like that should be bigger for some reason. And then is simply mailing out 4 books effective to 40 books to help your promotion. I don't really know that because I'm not an author, but it just makes me question if that's feasible. And then in the community engagement, it would have been great to really hear why these are your partners here, because I think I might have missed that, or maybe that could have been a misread on my end, but I didn't see why you selected these partners and what the benefit is outside of a performance. Because I think one way you could have, that I read this, was that it's more of a like a business strategy, and like you're really trying to find the influencers to find your promotion. And so just really making sure you're talking about a community benefit and how your book and how this project is a mechanism for benefiting the community, would just make sure that it's clear that that is it and not some type of artist promotion. So.
Awesome, thank you.
I have just a quick question for my note-taking purposes. Ariel, could you say again the type of mail that you recommended?
Yes, USPS media mail.
Got it. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Awesome. Eric is finalizing his comments. Awesome. We will move to our last and final application for the day. On-ramp 2023 Wills. Our first reader is Ariel.
Okay, once again, I really enjoyed this. I think this is a really impactful project, and it's great that you already have experience in this realm, but you're just going a little further here. So I think the goals were great, and I have an understanding of your creative work and goals. I think the progress towards your career goal section is a bit vague. So again, what are the markers for success here? How will this notebook differ from the last in terms of success? How can you identify, one of the things you mentioned is you would like to go from hobby writer to part-time writer. How can you identify when that has happened? And so though the goals are outlined, I'm not really understanding in the application yet how this will be the notebook to move the needle from hobby writer to part-time writer, and how we can gauge that. For feasibility, the timeline looks great. I was curious about the implementation of feedback after February or March. So it kind of, I think that seems to be the end of the timeline there. And so I'm wondering what that timeline looks like. What will receiving that feedback help you accomplish? And then where does it go from there? Are you going to use this feedback to promote? Does this look like quotes and digital assets to further promote this journal? Or are you using that feedback to kind of rework the journal and then put it out again? So I did have some questions about that. And then this might have been just me and my reading, but it would have been helpful for the community organizations that you plan to work with. It would have been helpful for that to be both in feasibility and in community engagement, because that question arose for me as I was reading feasibility, and then you answered in community engagement. So just noting that there. Also for community engagement, I think this is great. And this is like, these are the perfect organizations to reach children. But again, I would love to know how you can take it a step further as far as future collaboration is concerned. I think just in general, with a few of the applications, we have this is what I'm doing in this project in the moment, but how can you keep these long-term, how can you make these relationships long-term to further your community impact and engagement, and to further and to grow your audience as well? And then how can they be part of the process as you put this journal out? Can they connect you with someone else? Can you expand just beyond the organizations that you've listed here? So I think this is really great. I think, again, this is an audience that often is overlooked when it comes to mental health. So I think this is a great project, but just some more details would really amp up that application.
Thank you, Ariel. Our next reader is Jenny.
Yeah, thank you. This was another really well-written application, and I really appreciate that. A little technical detail I noticed in the project overview section at the very beginning, where we do those project start date and end dates. The project ends on February 29th, but then down in the kind of narrative of your response, you did, stretch into March for feedback. So that's just a little technical thing, but just, always take a final review of the application to make sure all of your timelines and everything line up as you've gone through. But in the responses, everything lined up well. In the feasibility section, budget and timeline all seemed very feasible to me. I just wanted to share kind of an additional idea for when you go into that pre-sale or distribution begins. I don't have children, but this sounds like a really wonderful project and might be something that, I might want to purchase to kind of sponsor for someone else. So maybe there's an opportunity for people who see this as a wonderful project and a resource that, there could be kind of like a donation, and then if 10 books are paid for, then you find an organization where 10 books could gifted and make an impact there. So making sure that the target audience isn't just for folks with children in that age, but looking beyond that and to the people that see the value, even if they don't have someone to gift it to immediately. And then I also just really appreciated, the fact that you acknowledged that you are not a subject matter expert in this area, and that you were going to, rely on those, community organizations and people who are experts to make sure that the content is accurate and meaningful and will, have the best impact for your readers. And to me, that's a really good example of that kind of meaningful two-way community engagement, because you are reaching out to the communities, you're learning from them, and they are influencing the work that you create, which is then going back to the community to let the children, that are using it benefit from that. So I really appreciated that you acknowledged that and really kind of tied out that two-way communication.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Just one technical one on the feasibility. I think they said they're going to purchase 500 or 1,000 books. Just be absolutely clear, and which one you're going to do. I think as we review grants, it doesn't have to be super precise in terms of like how it actually ends up. But just make a decision now. It's your best guesstimate. And so kind of just seeing that gap that it could be 500, it could be 1,000, and that's a $2,000 difference. That just gives me a little pause about, is this even, where's this money going to come from? And I know you kind of listed it in personal contributions and possible crowdfunding, but just be absolutely clear so we as the reviewer don't have any questions.
Definitely. Any other comments? All righty. Finalizing comments. Awesome. This concludes our discussion for the day. Yay, thank you to all of our panelists. Just a quick debrief for our artists watching. As this concludes our panel for the day, there is no need to begin to email me defending any of the comments from our panelists. A lot of this is intended for professional development. And so with these comments, the next step is for Eric and I to determine what actually is required for you to modify to move forward. With that being said, we will enter those into applications, and that will be coming into in a next steps form for signature, all of that good stuff. So correspondence from myself will come, just wait. It will be at the end of the month. And once that comes, we can discuss all of the feedback if need be. Okay. Of course, if there are any questions or concerns, you can give me a call or email. But again, if it's related to this, we are going to get to the feedback here. Okay. Awesome. You guys did great. Looking forward to all of your projects, and thank you for joining us today.